Good evening. Welcome to Anthem Memory Care's monthly webinar. Thank you for joining us today. Anthem Memory Care is proud to operate 20 communities across 9 states, and we're thrilled to have representation from all of them on this call. As a leader in memory care, our mission extends beyond our communities. We strive to be a trusted resource for families and caregivers everywhere. That's why for the past year and a half, we've been hosting these free monthly educational webinars, providing valuable insight and support to those navigating the journey of memory care. Today's presentation is being recorded, and you can access this session along with all past webinars on the Anthem website under Family Resources. You can also access them on our Anthem YouTube channel. Now, let's get started. Let me ask you some questions. Are you hoping to better understand how to communicate with someone who has dementia? Do you want to better reduce your stress caring for someone with dementia? If you've answered yes to either of these questions, you're in the right place. Our presenter this evening is the author of Cruising Through Caregiving, Reducing the Stress of Caring for Your Loved One, as well as Reimagining Customer Service in Healthcare. She's a former gerontology instructor at Johns Hopkins University's Certificate on Aging program. One of less than 800 certified speaking professionals worldwide, she has been featured in national media, including ABC, CBS, The Washington Post, and the Chicago Tribune. When she's not speaking and writing about caregiving and healthcare, she can be found wandering around consignment shops looking for a great deal. Please join me in welcoming, all the way from Kent Island, Maryland, Jennifer FitzPatrick, MSW, CSP.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm so happy to be here with you all. Tonight, we're going to talk about dementia fluency. When you've got a loved one who has Alzheimer's disease, frontotemporal dementia, Lewy body dementia, they are losing words, phrases, and skills on a daily basis. A lot of times it'll seem very gradual, especially with an Alzheimer's type of dementia, but there's many, many losses. It's not just the memory, and that ability to communicate is really impacted. So your loved one, the person that you are caring for, has a new language, and it will probably become a bit newer and a bit more different every few years. The reason that this happens is because it's the dementia's fault. Most people, when they think about dementia, and I'm sure when you start helping out with your loved one or caring for your loved one, you went to the doctor, you went to a clinic, you went to somewhere to get a diagnosis, and you understood, okay, there's memory problems. Or if your loved one has a condition like Lewy body dementia, you've got some Parkinsonian symptoms. But it probably wasn't explained right away that the way that person communicates with you is going to be so different. And usually for most dementias, that's not one of the first symptoms. That's not one of the first signs. So memory, most people get that. Most people can wrap their head around, all right, my mom does not realize that it's the winter and that it's snowing outside today. They understand maybe she's forgetting and she thinks that it's summer, or that my husband maybe doesn't remember the name of our neighbor that we lived near us for a while. But the impact on the physical body, but any type of irreversible dementia impacts the entire physical body. And so everything is impacted. And especially tonight, what we're going to focus on is communication and language. So everyone, the professionals that are joining us tonight, you've seen this a million times, but a lot of families have not always seen this. The 4 A's of Alzheimer's disease. Most people, they wrap their heads around the amnesia part, the loss of the short-term memory. The apraxia is something that happens with losing control of body movements. We sometimes take for granted when we get up to go to the bathroom or to go make something in the kitchen or to go get ourselves an aspirin or a Tylenol or something like that. We're using a lot of body movements in order to be able to do that. But it's automatic. It's just sort of on autopilot. You don't really think about all the movements your body has to make. your brain controls that. It's that controls everything about moving your body. Agnosia, the last one, is the external inability to recognize familiar people, places, things. The internal, you don't realize if you're hungry or you're thirsty or you need to use the restroom. But the big one for tonight that is part of why we're talking about this topic is aphasia, the losing the ability to understand words and to understand phrases, and the communication piece that that is very precious to all of us. Being able to verbally communicate really takes a hit when we have a dementia type, an Alzheimer's type of dementia or any other type of dementia. So I want to just really challenge you to remember that we have to be the one to adjust. We've got to be the one to change, because we've got to figure out their language. They're never going to be able to choose to keep using our language. The way we rely on verbal, they're just simply not going to be able to do it as their disease progresses. It's just not something that they can control. We have to be the one to jump in and say, I'm going to learn this new language, and realize that for the first couple of years, it's probably going to not be as tough. But as time goes on with a dementia diagnosis, you're going to need to keep adjusting. And let's talk specifically about how do we do that. So in my book, Cruising Through Caregiving, I talk about the concept of the language of dementia being like getting around a foreign country. And so you may recognize the flags here. And the first one, probably everybody recognizes as Ireland. The second one, probably many people recognize as Italy. And then the last one, I've never actually had anybody get this when they saw the flag, but the last one, people have had lots of guesses, but the last flag is Yemen. And so I liken the stages of Alzheimer's, and Alzheimer's, we're going to use that as an example because it's the most common form of dementia. I liken this to Ireland being the early stages of Alzheimer's disease, Italy being the mid stages, and Yemen being the late stages. And so just to give you an idea of what you can expect language-wise. So let's start with, you're going to get wherever you are. Let's pretend tomorrow morning we've given you an all-expense paid trip to Ireland. You're going to get on an airplane and you're going to fly to Dublin, and you haven't prepared. You haven't done anything to prepare to go to Ireland. But you decide, I'm going to go, it's an all expense paid trip, and you get to the airport and you get on the airplane and you fly to Ireland. And when you arrive, you are finding that you get off the plane, and yes, it's different. There's an accent, a brogue that people speak with. It's probably greener than a lot of places in the United States. People drink a lot more Guinness. But for the most part, a lot is very familiar. So you're not having to translate. Yes, some people might be speaking Gaelic, some signs might be in Gaelic, but for the most part, people are speaking English. People, they're communicating in a way, just gesticulating the way you and I might with our hands. We get there, and it's not culture shock. It's not culture shock. And so I liken this, even though Ireland, yes, it's different and it's foreign, I liken this to the early stages of Alzheimer's. Because when somebody's in the early stages of any dementia, the symptoms most of the time are coming in, but they're gradual, with the exception really of vascular dementia. But they're coming in and you're noticing things. And maybe in the beginning, you wrote some of the symptoms off. Maybe your loved one in the early stages got lost in your neighborhood, or they were driving a car and they got lost driving a car, or they forgot the name of something that they should really know the name for. Maybe the name of their favorite book or movie, or a friend's name that they've known for a really long time. So there's moments where they have a tough time, but at the same time, they're still themselves to a large extent. And so the difference between being with that person before the early stages, there's a difference. but it's not a dramatic difference. And so I think for a lot of people, when they are finding themselves taking care of someone or helping out with somebody who has the early stages of a dementia, they think, okay, well, this is tough. My loved one isn't the same as they've been, but right now I'm getting used to it. And this can last, this time period, the early stage can last maybe a year, 3 years, 5 years. It really depends on the individual person. But what we're seeing in the early stages of dementia is, especially with Alzheimer's type, we're seeing trouble, confusion, maybe getting lost in familiar places. We're seeing some forgetfulness. And this is the time where a lot of people do get a diagnosis, go try to get tested and see what's going on. But there still are, and probably many of you out there are experiencing, yeah, we didn't do that. We sort of waited until things got worse. And so, what you might see in the Ireland phase or the early stages, language wise, is you might be seeing that they're losing a little bit of their vocabulary. You might see that the person is not able to, the word finding is harder than it's been. Now, of course, with normal aging, the normal aging process, we all have what we call tip of the tongue moments where I forget the name of that actor that was in the movie this that I was watching with my spouse this weekend, and then okay, it was Meryl Streep. You remember it an hour later. But more so that you're forgetting what the word is for a phone or a fork. So that you're able to communicate with this person still in a lot of cases, but it's getting harder. There's going to be challenges. You might ask your loved one, what would you like for dinner? What are you in the mood for to eat tonight? And your loved one says to you, uh, curtains, and you think, well, that doesn't really make any sense, because their person is trying to talk like they usually would, but the right words aren't always coming out. But again, remember, just like when we're visiting Ireland with no prep, we didn't look up any travel books, we didn't download any apps on our phones. When somebody visits Ireland, they're still going to navigate and get around. It's still going to be okay. But again, it's different. There is a difference. So the mid stages of Alzheimer's or many dementias becomes more challenging. So if I send you to the airport tomorrow morning and I say you have an all expense paid trip that you're going to get dropped off in, the plane's going to take you to Rome, uh, it's going to be different. It's going to be a lot different over in Italy. And so while a lot's going to look familiar because the food's going to look familiar, everybody knows Italian food who lives in the US. Everybody, uh, most people have taken a Romance language either in high school or in middle school, or some people even in elementary school. And sometimes I have nieces and nephews that are little kids that are learning foreign languages. But even if you didn't take Italian, you're going to pick up on some of the words. The way that they gesture will be similar. So if you're in a restaurant and you're trying to get your check, you're going to scribble into the air if you don't speak the language. So you did no prep, you get on a plane, you go to Italy. There's going to be a lot that's very different, but there's also going to be a lot that you can navigate. It's okay. And I want to liken that to the mid stages of Alzheimer's, that the loved one is still there. You see glimpses of that person, but more and more and more, you're seeing more challenges. The person's getting lost more. They're getting confused. They might not recognize their spouse. Their ability to tell us what they want is really going to be limited. And so again, this is not completely foreign, but it is still pretty foreign. There's going to be a lot of challenges. You're going to see more and more issues with vocabulary. You're going to see more and more issues with not being able to figure out the right word, not being able to respond in a way that most of us would think was appropriate or makes sense. Now, Yemen, if I put you on a plane to Yemen tomorrow and you didn't prep and you didn't read about Yemen, it's not going to go well. It's going to go really poorly. So Yemen is really a third world country. It's very undeveloped. At any given time, there could be State Department warnings about things that are happening over there. If you don't speak Arabic or read Arabic, you're probably going to have a really big problem. The dress code, especially for women, is very, very different than it is in the United States. So when you get to the late stages of Alzheimer's disease or any type of dementia, if you haven't prepared, it is just jarring, much like it would be getting off an airplane in Yemen without any prep. Not knowing the proper clothing that women don't have the same rights that they do in the United States if they're in Yemen. You can get in a lot of trouble for certain types of behaviors, such as not wearing the clothes that are expected. So going to Yemen with no prep, again, if you are taking care of somebody in the early stages, you're still seeing a lot more glimpses of the person that you know or you knew. The late stages, it's very much like this person is not able to communicate at all. And when the person is in this stage, we talked a few moments ago about how the brain controls everything, and the brain tells us, okay, how to walk to the kitchen or to the bathroom. It reminds us where do I go get a glass of water, all of that. So the person ultimately is not really able to move their body anymore in the late stages. And the language is really all but gone. Some people might still have some words, but there may be syllables. They may have a phrase, a word. We hear a lot of noises coming from somebody with late stage of Alzheimer's disease. They might moan, they might cry, they might shout out, they might use behaviors to communicate more. And so slowly but surely through these stages, we're seeing less reliance on language. And so their ability to understand us is going downhill, and our ability to understand them is going downhill. So by the time you get to the late stage, by the time you get to Yemen, your loved one is really just unable to communicate. And this is when it's most important. It's important during all the stages to try to be patient and learn their language, but it's almost impossible to understand what your loved one needs if you get to that Yemen late stage and you haven't figured out how to decode some of the things that they're trying to tell you. So again, early, middle, late, you're still going to see a lot of glimpses in that mid stage of that person that you know. There's still going to be a lot of attempts to verbally communicate, sometimes successfully. But really, what we really need to prepare for, especially, is we want to be mindful of the later stages. How it's going to get harder. And I think one of the cruelest things about dementia is once somebody settles in as a family caregiver, all right, I got this under control. I know what my mom or I know what my husband is trying to tell me. I know what they need in the early stages. Well, then they progress and things start to get a little tougher. They get a little bit worse. And now you almost sometimes feel like you're starting from brand new. You're starting over trying to get to know what they're trying to tell you at any given moment. I see one of the biggest challenges families have is trying to carry on like everything is normal. I can say when I was in the late stages, I've been a family caregiver for several people in the late stages, for my grandfather, for my grandmother-in-law, for my grandmother. And up until the last day or two, and none of them had any type of dementia, they all could tell me what they wanted. They could all, my grandmother-in-law, who was dying from cancer, I would say to her when I was taking care of her, what do you want to eat today? What are you in the mood for? Or is it too warm in here? And she could respond and she could tell me. It was interesting because with my grandmother-in-law, we were feeding her what I call sick people food. We were giving her soup and crackers, and one day she just said, I really want a donut. And she could tell me that, but if somebody's in this late stage of dementia, they're not going to be able to say, hey, I really want a donut. I'm craving a donut, but I know I can't eat a donut, because remember, the brain is shutting down parts of the body. Even if that was something that they were able verbally to say that they wanted a donut, their body wouldn't be able to allow them to process a donut by chewing. So it just adds such a challenge. Any kind of caregiving, I think dementia caregiving is some of the toughest caregiving. So thank you all for doing that for your family members. I know that many people, especially if you're on a program like this evening, many people feel like it's an obligation, it's a vow that they made, that they don't have a choice. But I know that myself and the other professionals from Anthem that are on this evening can tell you there's plenty of family members that opt out of caregiving. So you're doing, however you're doing right now, I'm sure that there's a lot of stress in your life with being a dementia caregiver, taking care of your loved one, and I'm sure you're doing the best you can. And hopefully these will give you some ideas and some tips on how to communicate better. So let's talk about what kind of mistakes might you make when visiting a foreign country? And then we're going to relate that back to what kind of mistakes do we make when we're trying to communicate with somebody who has an advanced dementia. So what kind of mistakes might we make? For one, you might make reservations late and you wind up in the middle seat, right? That's something that you might make, or you might forget your passport. We might not pack properly for the weather if we didn't plan ahead. We might not make reservations at all at a hotel. We might not make the effort to understand something about the culture and the customs, especially important when we're talking about a place like Yemen. Not pacing yourself. I'm sure many of us have been, I know that I have been on a vacation where you're just doing too much. You're doing too much. You are trying to see everything. You're you're taking it, and you almost come back from the trip and you feel like, gosh, I need a vacation from the vacation. So let's relate this back to the mistakes that we make when we are trying to be dementia fluent. And because I'm sure nobody on here this evening is saying, I really don't want to communicate better with my loved one. I'm sure everybody wants it to be simpler and easier and to understand and get your loved one's needs met. But one of the top mistakes I see is doing reality orientation after the early stages. So, like we talked about in the Ireland stage, a lot of people still have lots of moments of clarity. And so if I say to my loved one who has Alzheimer's disease, what do you feel like for dinner? And they say they feel like spaghetti, that's great. We're able to have that conversation. When I get to the mid stages, more often than not, they're not going to always understand that question. And so the reality orientation that we might be doing is, Mom, we really need to know, is there something special you would like for dinner? I asked you what you wanted for dinner. You don't, when you might want to cue somebody in the Ireland stage, you don't want to do that to somebody in the Italy or the Yemen stage. Another example of reality orienting, and this happens so often, is that you're telling your loved one that it's time to go to the doctor, and they say to you, and they're in the Italy stage, and they say to you, okay, well, where are we going? And you're saying, Mom, I already told you we're going to the doctor. Now, I understand why family caregivers do this, of course, because you're frustrated, you're exhausted, and you think there are days and moments that she would remember we're going to the doctor. But to reality orient her and say, well, I just told you that. The best thing we can possibly do in the mid stages is to just simply say, up, we're going to the doctor, and just repeat yourself, even though it's really tough. And this goes into why you need a break, because and why you want to be looking at services like Anthems, because if you're finding your frustration level really rising, which most people's are, when you're getting into that mid stages, um, it's very possible that they're seeing on your face that you're exasperated, that you're tired, that you do not want to say, we're going to the doctor again. Uh, and I think a lot of families even have moments like, well, she remembered yesterday when I told her we were going to the grocery store. Why wouldn't she remember that we're going to the doctor? We can't explain it. It's really not something that we can really explain. This is there's so much about these diseases that are just difficult to get. And so there's going to be, especially in the Italy stage, there's going to be days where they get it, and then there's going to be days where they don't get it. But for a lot of people with the early stages, in the Ireland stage, they want you to reality orient them. If they make a mistake, they might actually say to you, tell me if I'm forgetting something, tell me. So I think reality orientation can be just fine in the early stages, but when you get to the mid stages, I worked with a family years ago where there was a woman who, uh, her husband was just obsessing every night. He would say, we have to start planning our 4th of July party. And she would do this, and he would do this, and she would say, honey, we've never had a 4th of July party. Honey, we've never had a 4th of July party. And he would say, yes, we do. And they would go back and forth. So she was trying to reality orient him. And in addition to telling him that they've never had a 4th of July party, she would say, honey, this is winter time. The 4th of July is not even for a long ways off. You don't know what you're saying. And then finally, in a burst of incredible frustration, she would say to him, you and I never had a 4th of July party. That's something you did with your ex-wife. And imagine this woman and her family. She was thinking, this first wife, he's thinking about the times that he spent with the first wife, and I'm the one caring for him during this horrible disease. That doesn't make her a bad wife or a family caregiver. That's a normal human reaction. Of course, she's going to have unreasonable feelings. He can't help it though, and we don't want to reality orient him. Correcting the person. Uh, we don't want to correct. This isn't a small child that we're trying to say, no, that was the wrong word. Or no, you want to use this word or use this fork. No, you want to be much more about cueing or validating that person. So if there's a situation where you find yourself correcting, especially after the Ireland stage. The Ireland stage, again, if that person's telling you, hey, tell me if I'm doing something that doesn't make sense, tell me if I've forgotten something. And some families do that with their loved one and it goes okay. In the mid stages, you're just not going to win. There's no winning that. So correcting. We see this a lot with names. And I once worked with a family where there was a grandfather who was very, very, very flirtatious with the granddaughter and didn't remember this was his granddaughter. And the family was, if you ever read the book, The 36-Hour Day by Ravens and Mace, which is a great book, he talks about that. Families think, oh my gosh, this is incest. This person does not realize this is their granddaughter. I'm assuming that there was nothing like that in the past, right? That this wasn't something that this gentleman would have done in the past. He thinks this is just a pretty young girl and he's flirting with her. Correcting, no, this is your granddaughter. When they see the anger or the stress or the embarrassment or the shame, that's going to impact their mood. People who have advanced dementia, our moods are so contagious to them. So correcting, and maybe the granddaughter doesn't visit for a little while because it's too awkward, but correcting and constantly reminding, this is your granddaughter, this is your granddaughter, this is your granddaughter, or I'm your wife, my name is Jennifer, saying those types of things over and over and over again. Now, some families really can't resist. They just, but do it once and then let it go. If you really feel like you have to correct, but try, because it's a battle you're just not going to win. Negative body language. Remember that the person who has the dementia, they are reading your facial expressions. They're reading your body. They're reading if you're frowning or you're smiling or you're grimacing, what's going on with your eyes. They're reading all of that. Now think about it. We all do this every day, but we are so fortunate that we can understand words and we can communicate with words as well, whether we send an email, whether we make a telephone call, whether we're on a Teams or a Zoom like this. um, we are constantly reading body language. I was in a coffee shop with a friend a couple of years back, and she was taking forever to figure out what she wanted. And the young ladies behind the counter started to make fun of her, but not in English. And my friend, all of a sudden, when she noticed that they were making fun of her, I'm guessing that you can imagine the scenario. They were speaking in a different language, actually Russian, and they were kind of rolling their eyes and kind of laughing and then kind of whispering to each other, but again in another language. But we could tell that they were making fun of her just simply because of the body language. And my friend said, "Excuse me," and they immediately came back and became professional. And we do it all the time if we don't understand somebody's language. We do it all the time, and it's much like what all of us would do if we got dropped off in Italy and we didn't speak the language. If we got dropped off in Yemen and we didn't speak the language, we'd be looking for clues. They're looking to you, so we want to try to keep our body language open and positive. I know that this is a tall order, but this is why there's services like Anthem out there, because it gets to the point, especially if you're doing it by yourself or even just maybe you and one other person, it's too much. It becomes a 24-hour a day job, especially once you get into Italy. Raising the volume of your voice if the loved one is not hearing impaired. Sometimes families feel like, well, if I say it a little bit louder, maybe it'll penetrate. And it doesn't, unless there's a hearing issue. So, but we also want to be careful about yelling into other rooms. When we're talking to the person with dementia, they are looking at our facial expressions to look at our mood. They are sometimes looking just to see if they can read us. And so what a lot of us are used to doing is we yell to the spouse or the daughter in another room. We might not be facing the person when we have a conversation. We're walking around or we're in a different room, but you want to, as much as possible, be able to have that being right in front of them and making sure that you're not raising your voice. Expecting the person to be just like us. So think about a mistake that we would make when we travel. So going to Ireland, Italy, or Yemen, especially if you're Yemen, this is a different culture. So we wouldn't expect the people that live in Yemen to think like us, to have a culture like us, to have a language like us. But we do this a lot to people who have dementia. We have these expectations that they're going to be able to be like us. They're going to be able to get dressed. Picking somebody up to go to a party, and maybe they're in the late stages of the disease, and you see their clothes are not clean. Maybe they look like they just came out of a hamper, and this person would never do that in the past. Well, the brain is shutting down that ability to realize that the clothing isn't clean, maybe putting on clothes backwards. They're communicating with you, my condition is getting worse. My ability to be like the person I used to be is going away. And so we got to release that, release the expectation for the loved one to be like us. We want to be grateful, all of us, we want to be grateful that uh, that we have our brain working properly, but we can't expect someone whose brain's working properly to be like us. So if you saw somebody tomorrow morning, you walk in on the street and you see a friend of yours and they're wearing crutches and they're walking around with crutches, are you going to say to them, hey, do you want to go run a 5K with me over the weekend? Or do you want to go running at the, want to go exercise at the gym, get on the Stairmaster or treadmill? No, you're not going to do that, because you see that this person's not like us today. They're having a challenge, and hopefully eventually they'll get off the crutches. But because a lot of times somebody with a dementia, their condition is invisible, especially in the early stages, and sometimes even into the mid stages. So we want to remember that that is just going to be one of those things that we just can't expect that person to be like us. Only using verbal. If we're only using verbal strategies, which, believe me, I get it. I'm a speaker and a writer. I love to talk with friends and family, but you can't rely on that anymore. You've got to look at other ways to communicate with somebody. And for a lot of us, this is a big loss. Maybe the person that has dementia in your life is your spouse, and you used to have the best conversations about current events, or you used to love talking about your kids and your grandkids. Or maybe it's your mother and you always really loved her advice, and that's how you connected. You've got to find different ways to connect now, because it's just not going to work the way it used to work. And it really is so lousy, but it's just another loss that everyone in this situation is experiencing. We can choose to use their language. They cannot choose to use ours. So much like when excuse me, when we go to a foreign country, it's customary for us to try to learn some of that language. We want to just try to adapt and adjust as much as possible. One of the best things about working with a memory care community like Anthem is that they do a lot of training on how to do this. This is their job. This is what they specialize in, and they understand how to use that language. And so I encourage you to talk to the staff and get tips from them as well, because they do this every day. Your loved one can't reason as time goes by. Early stages, when you're in Ireland, there's some reasoning still going on a good amount of the time. In fact, some people, they're still living a pretty good life, and they're very much like themselves. Once they get into the mid stages, a lot of the ability to reason goes away. So when we're trying to be rational and reason, and I think that there's a lot of families that maybe you live in. I know Chris is in Ohio, and maybe he's the primary caregiver for a loved one. And then when Nicole or Jamie from Anthem would come into town, and mom remembers their name, and maybe Chris would get really upset and say, well, gosh, why would she remember their name and not my name today? They're not going to be able to reason with you on why today they're able to do something or not do it. In Cruising Through Caregiving, my first book, I have a whole chapter on your loved one as an adult. They're not a child. And we do want to remember to treat them like an adult, to have dignity, to treat them with dignity, but we want to also know that a lot of their skills and their verbal abilities are going to be more childlike. The tragedy is that the child, a small child, is growing and developing and is going to get more adept with their language skills. The person with an advanced dementia is going to be getting less so and less so and less so. So I recently had a girls' weekend at my house. It was my sister and my aunts and my cousins and my nieces and nephews. I'm sorry, not my nephews, but my nieces. And the two babies, my nieces that are babies, oh gosh, they just were so fun. But the way that they're communicating with us, we're not going to say when Olivia is here and she's pointing at a bagel one day, she's pointing at a bagel. She's 1 year old. She's turning 1 on the weekend. We're not going to say, Olivia, tell us exactly what you want. No, we're going to take her direction and say, oh, she wants a little piece of the bagel, which is what is natural to us, because we know that the brain is not developed yet. But when somebody with dementia points at something, we might expect them to actually say what they need, say what they want, but they're not going to be able to. That's the way they're communicating with you now. And so much like we treat children like, okay, that's the way that they're able to do it, that's the way they're able to communicate. When my niece Josie was exhausted, she didn't nap for 2 days because she was having so much fun with everybody. She had an absolute meltdown, was sobbing for no reason. And we didn't say to her, well, why didn't you tell us earlier that you were in a bad mood? No, we just know that this is how she's communicating. She's exhausted. And so much like their moms know, hey, this is what's they're trying to tell me. We have to learn how to do that with our loved one. We've got to learn how to figure out, what are they trying to tell us? What are their needs? Because it's up to us to help them get their needs met, much like a parent would help a child get their needs met. Now, at the same time, we have to remember dignity. This person lived a full life. They're a grown up still. So football, had a conversation with Jamie a little while ago about, sadly, Kansas City not winning, but I want to talk to you about two dudes watching a football game. So obviously, I know that women like football too, but I want to give you this example about how a good interaction, make the analogy, how a good interaction with somebody with Italy or Yemen stage of dementia goes. Because so many people rely on verbal skills to connect with their loved one, and conversation and discussion. And this tends to be, not always, but psychologically, historically, a very female way of looking at the world, connecting through conversation. A lot of men are actually good, maybe just going to watch a game and maybe not talking so much, that they wouldn't have a big conversation about it. Again, I know not every woman is like that and not every man is like that. But the point I'm trying to get at for you is that this is what you want to look at it like. Two folks watching a football game. What can you do once language goes away? What can you do to enjoy each other's company that doesn't require conversation and discussion? Is it putting on music that they like? Is it putting on an old movie that they would want to watch? Is it gardening, going out in the garden and working together? Is it taking a walk? What are things that you can do that are like two dudes watching a game and they don't really need a lot of conversation? A couple of years ago, my husband was going out for beers and to watch a game with one of his friends who had recently broken up with a girlfriend. And when he came back, I said, "How's Billy doing?" And he says, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, how's he doing since the breakup?" And my husband said, "Well, I don't know. We didn't talk about it." And I said, "Well, what did you do?" And he said, "We watched the game." And it just really spoke to me that this way of just enjoying each other's company, having a presence, giving a hand massage, watching a game, watching a baseball game, a basketball game, if the person loves sports. But just that simple act of just doing something together. People that can't talk or understand what you're saying, a lot of times they can garden. They can swim with supervision. They can take a walk. There's things that they can make jewelry. They can help you bake. There's things that that person can do. You can do an activity together of some sort. More so in the mid stage. Late stage, there's a lot less ability to do those sorts of activities, but there are still activities that can be done. Using cues. So cueing how to use a pen or how to use a fork or a spoon, maybe not using the words, but demonstrating, showing, much like we would do, again, with a small child, even though the person is a grown-up. We know that this person is an adult, but we want to cue them, guide them to the bathroom, lay out the clothing that you want them to wear instead of saying, what do you feel like wearing? Make it easy for them. Using touch. Don't underestimate touch. Especially when your loved one is in Italy or later, and the touch that they're getting is really clinical. Maybe you're helping them in the bathroom, they're giving them their medicines, you're brushing their hair, and it's really because they need to be cleaned up, or they but using touch as far as a hand massage, a manicure, a pedicure, uh, just holding hands while you're sitting together watching a movie or walking. This is something that is communicative. And if it's a love relationship or romantic relationship or partnership, cuddling in bed, those sorts of things, connecting in that way um, is going to be more powerful than having a conversation. And again, like I said, I know that there's many people on here suffering because you're missing that. You're missing, gosh, I used to love going to her for advice, or gosh, I used to love getting their take on something that happened at work or something going on with the kids. But just we don't want to ask them for something that they can't give to us. Being really intentional about body language. Uh, I know this is not easy. And believe me, because I've worked in healthcare and senior care pretty much my whole career, I have made mistakes around this. By the way, I've made all the mistakes that you've made too. I'm sure of it for sure many times. Even if you are an expert and you've done all of this many times, you still are going to make mistakes and rush sometimes. But when we are spending time with somebody or we're trying to communicate, we want to just be intentional. We want to be careful about our facial expressions, our body language. If we're going to get somebody to help them go to the bathroom, or we're going to bring them to dinner, or we're going to take their hand so we can get them in the car to go to the doctor's, we want to just make eye contact with them, look at their face. Okay, we're going to go. You might just guide them. But because families are exhausted and stressed and rushing, we tend to run out of patience. And if you feel like your patience is waning, you really, really want to think about, what do I need to do? What more help do I need? Get help. Because if you're not being able to be the family caregiver that you want to be, and your loved one's not receiving the care that they need. But being intentional about your facial expressions, your body language, your eye contact. Try to be really mindful about tracking behaviors. If your loved one is screaming or crying or pacing, why is that behavior happening? What's happening right now? Where are you? What time of day? When you're able to log and track, you can really use this detective work to say, all right, there seems to be some triggers here. Maybe when the phone rings, there's upset. Maybe when the neighbor's dog barks, or what is causing, when you have a behavior that you don't want to see more of, or that you would like to see diminished, and just what can you do? You can't, right? You can't stop the people from delivering the mail, the post office from delivering the mail, but can your loved one, if that stresses your loved one out, can your loved one be uh, guided into some kind of fun activity right around the time when the post office comes to drop off the mail? Why, where, when is it happening? Is there something in my environment? Is there something that I've done that maybe seems to trigger them? Maybe it's the tone of voice I use when I'm really exhausted. Maybe it's when they hear an ambulance. Maybe when they're in a big crowd. Maybe some of you had the experience over the holiday season where there was a lot of people around and your loved one withdrew or started to cry or became really agitated. A lot of times, especially when somebody gets to Italy, and certainly when they get to Yemen, they really have a hard time being around large groups of people. And so smaller gatherings often are better choices. I love these from the Alzheimer's Association. If you go to alz.org, you can uh, grab these, or call them 800-272-3900. These cards, I think, are wonderful, because if you're out and about at a restaurant, if you are even at a doctor's office, so many physicians' offices or medical practices, the receptionist might not understand that there's an issue with your loved one communicating. Put people on notice. Families can share these cards and just share. You actually can also print these at aphasia. I believe it's aphasia.org. They have a different version of this card that you can print off at your home. But this is a way to prevent a problem, to prevent a language problem, to prevent some stranger, some server in a restaurant, some receptionist at a doctor's office asking your loved one questions, and then the awkwardness and the difficulty of them not being able to respond in a way that makes sense and it avoids embarrassment. Considering therapeutic fibbing, I know a lot of families take a really hard line on, I will never lie to my loved one. I will never lie to my mom or my husband or my sister. And I am not a big fan of this as the top strategy, but I do think sometimes it's okay. What I'd be really careful about is specifics. So if your loved one is saying to you, when's my mother coming to visit? And you know their mother's been gone for 40 years, reality orientation is not a good idea. Reality orientation is, especially after the early stages in Ireland, sometimes it might be okay, especially if they've asked you to do it, but in Italy and Yemen, no. When they say that, you might want to say, oh, I'll have to check with her. And depending on where you are spiritually, maybe you can check with her. But I think it's really very important to know that it's probably not a good idea to use a therapeutic fib like, oh, she'll be here tomorrow, because you never know what sticks in their head. And that can really be traumatizing. So maybe I'll have to check with her. But another strategy that can be really helpful is validating. Like, she's got mom on her mind. Let's look at pictures of mom. Let's talk about mom. Let's reminisce about a memory of mom. And I also really like Naomi Files' books, The Validation Breakthrough, and those books. She's got some great videos out there. She found it validation. Never argue. You're never going to win it. What do you think happened to the woman who kept telling her husband that 4th of July party wasn't happening and that it was winter and that that's a party he had with his ex-wife? It didn't go well. I really worked with coaching her around why that's not a good idea. Why a lot of times that person will engage verbally. If they're still verbal, they sometimes will become more argumentative, and sometimes they even will become physically imposing, because think about, their impulse control is limited when the dementia is robbing them of impulse control. So don't argue. Go along with it. What that woman, I recommended that woman do is plan the 4th of July party. Talk about 4th of July. Talk about what kinds of stuff do you like to eat at 4th of July? Oh, fireworks are beautiful. That's a way better. Now, I understand, of course, also that the wife was sick of hearing about it, which is why she needs help. She might need assisted living placement. She might need a little bit of help in the home. She might need other friends and family to help out. So I really like this. This is from in the OC County in the Alzheimer's Association. I like this quote. Whatever you're using, it's how it's going to benefit that person that you're taking care of. What's the benefit to them, but also what's the benefit to you? Sometimes no response can be okay. Reorientation, again, that reality orientation, I really be careful about that. Only early stages, because it's just typically, it's just not going to work. It's really not going to be a good thing to work. As far as fibbing goes, I really think look at, just be vague. If you're going to do it, be vague. Be mindful about that. But you always want to keep in mind that we are the only ones that can change our strategy. We are the only ones. Their brain is really not capable of trying harder. And I know a lot of families try to hold on to that. Well, maybe she's getting better. Well, what happens more frequently is maybe there is more of a she's having a good day, or she's having some moments of clarity. But if she has a good day and she knows who you are today, and she knows what time of year it is, and she seems really good today, just know, hopefully it'll continue, but probably if she truly has an advanced dementia and irreversible dementia, it's probably going to keep getting worse. And so you want to have lots of strategies up your sleeve, but you're the only one that can change. I bet if you asked your loved one, would you like to be able to communicate the way we used to? If they could tell you, they would say, yes, yes, I would love to communicate the way we used to, but they can't. So we're right at the end. I know that we're going to be opening it up for questions, but I did want to let everybody know that you can get a free chapter in all of the worksheets from Cruising Through Caregiving if you just go to cruisingthroughcaregiving.com. And the worksheets, they're completely free, and you can print them off and you can share them with anybody else in your family. But especially the one about martyr syndrome, I encourage you to take that. And then also the MET exercise. If you are caregiving alone and you really feel like there's nobody else, that I'm the only one, no one's helping me. Those are the two exercises that I think would be really helpful to you. But I'm going to turn it back over to the team at Anthem and let them take it from here.
All right. Well, thank you, Jennifer. That was fantastic. We are opening it up to questions. You can either write it in the chat or raise your hand. And if you raise your hand, I'll unmute you for your question. But I'm going to go to the chat first. There is a question in here from Christina who said, early on, you said it's different for those with vascular dementia. How so?
So it typically comes on more suddenly than the symptoms come on more suddenly typically than for somebody with the other dementias. The other dementias are usually more gradual with the symptoms appearing.
Okay. And then Robert has his hand up. So Robert, you should be able to unmute yourself now and ask your question. You able to?
I know it sometimes can take a minute to find the microphone and the unmute button. Sometimes it can take some time. Curious if anybody has a specific scenario that they want to run through, maybe something really specific that's going on with your loved one right now that you want to get some feedback on.
Okay, so there is a question that came through, and it says, where can those Alzheimer's cards be found to be passed out?
So if you call, oh, sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
I was just gonna say, if you could say, you went pretty fast when you gave those websites earlier, if you wouldn't mind saying it again.
Sure, it's alz.org if you go to the Alzheimer's Association. But if you talk to your local Anthem, I'm sure that they could point you in the direction of your local chapter. But you could call the helpline at 800-272-3900. Sorry, I just did it again. 800-272-3900.
Thank you. Anne, you should be able to come off mute.
Yeah, hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. My question was around situations when our loved one is like aggressive, either verbally or possibly even like physically. How would you recommend diverting and kind of addressing those types of situations while remaining calm?
Yeah, it's really hard. Tell me, would you mind sharing a specific example? And then if you're okay with it, I'm going to ask you a couple questions after you tell me the example.
Yeah, sure.
And then I'll answer you.
Apologize in advance. I have some kids at home if you hear some background noise.
I don't hear anything.
Yeah, so a lot of times when my dad or myself were ending a visit with my mom, who's a patient at Emerald Care, she'll get upset and shout and things like, I don't love you, like I can't, I want to get out of here, things like that are, I know it's out. She's doesn't even remember she says these things, but it's like a way of acting out. Very similar to my kids, actually. But yeah, so like what would be strategies for when you're in the moment to address communication like that? Does that
First of
help
all,
paint, help paint a picture?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for sure. First of all, I'm really sorry you're going through that. That's incredibly painful. And I'm sure it makes you feel terribly guilty and sad and a lot of different emotions. But let me ask you this. When exactly, how does it go? Like are you just saying goodbye to her and then she starts to yell?
Yeah, that's typically it. So like my dad usually visits, and this is still like new, we're 2 weeks into this. My dad usually visits, and when it's time for him to go, he does, say goodbye. I think he's trying to drop her off or bring her to the dining hall. But at the moment when he does leave, that's when she gets upset
Yeah.
and angry.
Yeah. So for one, it's still very new, and this is pretty common for some people
Right.
that,
Right.
so it's going to take some time, but I would consider what you can do to prevent it, and then I'll talk a little bit about what you can do to manage it when it happens. So I'm guessing, especially since it's very new, that this was a really hard decision and there's a lot of mixed, difficult feelings about it. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're spot on. Very spot
But
on.
but I'm guessing that you and your dad are making your body language is angst filled when you're telling her goodbye.
Yeah, that could be.
So I would try something like um this. I know this is everything I'm about to say is not easy. I'm going to recognize that, but I would try something like try to center yourself and give your mom a kiss and say, all right, I love you. It was great to see you, but I got to go pick up the kids and I'll be back. I'll be back soon. Try to practice it at home. Practice. I'm serious. Practice it and psych yourself up for it, because a lot of this is she's reading we talked a lot about body language tonight. She's reading your facial expression. She's reading your eyes. She's reading the way that you feel, if you feel sad or guilt-ridden or angry about the situation, whatever it might be. Could be a lot of different things. And she could be responding to that. Um, that said, after, if it happens, um, if it's happening, you might try to work with the staff there to just let them know that when you're leaving, and you probably already have done that, but let them know before the next visit that you're going to try this strategy to just get yourself a little bit more control over your body language, but that maybe a staff person could come by when you're getting ready to leave, and they could maybe attend to her for a few moments. And also just saying, maybe if she's telling you she hates you or she doesn't, whatever negative things that she's saying, just try to be quiet and calm and say, I love you and I'll see you soon. Uh, the other thing that some families find works, and there's no one way to do this, but some families just slip out. They maybe go into, there's entertainment or something, and they go and watch the entertainment, and then mom's engaged with the entertainment and they slip out, and you avoid the whole goodbye process. Now, I know for a lot of families that seems like blasphemy, that's mean, but especially if, and I would ask the staff, like, hey, staff, for how long is she upset when I leave? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 5 hours? Because it might be that once she's involved in an engaging activity, whatever that might be, you went to the gardening project with her and then you sort of slip out. It could be that you're avoiding the whole thing. I know that that doesn't seem nice, but it's something that you might want to try.
Yeah, those are great tips. Thanks,
I
Jen.
love those ideas. Thank you so much. Those are really, really strong strategies. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm sorry you're going through it. It's awful. You don't deserve, your mom and your family don't deserve that. I'm sorry you're going through it.
There's a question in the chat about, can you give some ideas of how to redirect my aunt when she says she wants to go home or wants to get a job? She's on hospice as of 2 weeks ago.
Oh. So, and she does have a dementia diagnosis though.
Would imagine yes.
Okay. No, I just didn't know if it was like just the normal hallucination that happens at end of life. So I would, when she says that, I would just talk to her about what jobs she has had. I would reminisce about jobs. Oh, what kind of job are you thinking of getting? What was your favorite job? Oh, let's talk about your job. Her mind is on jobs, or her mind is on home. If it's talking about home, again, going back to the therapeutic fibbing, well, and if she's in hospice, I'm curious to the person that asked that question, is she at hospice at home? Or is she at hospice at senior living? Or is she in a hospice facility? Where kind of place are we talking about?
Linda, are you able to add that to the chat? Okay. She's in a facility, in a community.
Oh, okay. So again, this is a therapeutic fib, but I don't think it's very dangerous because she is dying. I would maybe say, well, the doctor says you got to stay here at the hospital for a while longer. You might try that because she's in a facility. She, in her mind, could, you have to stay here while you're getting treatment. You might, uh, one of the, the other thing I want to address is that when somebody is in actively dying, they talk about home a lot. And there's a whole bunch of reasons that people think this is. People with dementia say that as well, but especially if she has dementia and she's dying, there could be, depending if she's a religious person, that there's a spiritual component to this. It could be that she's thinking about like just her house. It could be any number of things, but when you're going to get some of that, at least some of it, because she's actively dying. Or if she's in hospice, I'm not sure if she's actively dying or how far out they think she is. But I would also suggest that just keeping her mind occupied, doing something, putting on music, putting on a movie, playing cards. What if she's still able to do anything? And there's something that she could do. You can give her a hand massage. You can. The reason I say that is because for a lot of people with dementia, the ruminating is going to be very associated with boredom, apathy, not being occupied, not having anything going on. And so think about yourself for a moment. If you aren't busy, uh, and maybe something's on your mind that you're stressed about. It could be anything, something with your family, something with your kids, maybe your parent, and then you're ruminating. Maybe it's something about your health. You're ruminating about it. You're thinking about it over and over and over again. But you find yourself, you go to the gym, you go have lunch with a friend, you go do something, and you're not ruminating as much. And people with dementia and people who are dying, they need those kinds of activities too. And so I would talk to hospice about um, what their take on it is. How far out do they think she is? They're not going to give you an exact number, but if she's actively dying, talking about home is really normal. Uh, but ask questions. I would ask questions. Tell me what you got on your mind. But if she's not actively dying, and you still can try, hey, the doctor wants you to stay here. That's usually pretty effective. It doesn't mean it's not going to be repeated. Just because you placate for a moment, it doesn't mean that it's not going to come back up again. It's the repeating is part of a lot of people with dementia, and it tends to be one of the things that makes families just so stressed out. But it's and this is why you want to have lots of people helping. Hospice, you have the senior living community. You don't want to do it by yourself. So if you have a follow-up question to that, I'd be glad to answer.
So we'll give her time to add something to the chat if she has. Just make sure. Yeah. The next question on here was, you had talked about how to ask questions, right? And kind of avoiding some of those really open-ended questions. But so Steve's asking if you could kind of share with the group about how to ask a question to encourage someone to eat versus, instead of saying, do you want to go to eat? How could you rephrase that so you can, the person would want to go eat? So let's go get something to eat, or, talking about the importance of just those little tweaks and how you ask the question and how important that is.
Well, Nicole just said it, a declarative statement. So one of the, and it goes back to, again, like what you would do with small children. And again, the person with dementia is an adult, of course, but if it's time to go to the babysitter's house, we don't say, do you feel like going to the babysitter's? We say, oh, we're going to go to the babysitter's, and we make it seem like it's going to be something that's not awful, that's fun, or something that they can look forward to. Now, I know that there's a lot that we're going to the doctor's isn't always an exciting, fun thing to do, but okay, it's time to leave for our appointment. And if it's somebody that doesn't really, they get stressed out about the doctor, it's time to go to our appointment. We're going to go. It's time. The car's all ready. Let's go. So much of it, or it's time to go have a sandwich, or, oh, I'm so excited. Let's go over to Mary's house and we're going to see the kids. Whatever you're saying, just try to monitor and your body language. And I think what we a lot of us do with kids sometimes, like, oh, they're not going to like this. And then we're like, oh, there's going to be a fight. They're not going to want to go to the store. They're not going to want to go to school. They're not. And doing the best you can to be enthusiastic. And again, I know this is a tall order. I know that. I'm just saying that if you can muster up some, not dread on your face, you decrease dread and stress on your face, it's contagious to the loved one that you're taking care of, because, oh, all right, that doesn't seem so bad. And the other thing is, just pick your battles. Some things do not have to be done. Some things do, but some things don't. And if you just, maybe you don't have the energy right now to go wherever it is that you were planning to go, and maybe you don't have the energy to put on the happy face to get your loved one to go and get into the car, then maybe skip it. Give yourself grace like that, because sometimes there's things like, think about, like, what, we human beings, if we have too much going on, it's not good. If we have too little going on, that's also bad. So try to make sure that your schedule with the things that you're doing with your loved one is manageable. The other thing is, if it's really going to be a fight, maybe bring the food to them. If it's, oh, we need to go take your medicine, we need to go get lunch, maybe eat the dinner or the lunch in the room where they're in, and maybe just think about what's the most important thing. If you have to choose between peace in the conversation or the interaction with your loved one, or having it done, quote unquote, the proper way, the right way, choose peace. Choose a peaceful interaction.
Good, thank you. What suggestions would you have when a mom asks why her husband has not visited and she is clearly upset, but she doesn't remember that the spouse actually passed away.
Yeah, this is really tough and really painful for families. So some families can't resist and they feel like they have to say, well, dad passed. I'm okay with doing it once, but don't beat them over the head with it, because then you can try it. Remember, dad actually passed 5 years ago. If you're getting a traumatic reaction, which a lot of people will fight with you, no, he did not die. Where is he? Don't ever do it again. I'd be really careful about doing it again. But especially the early stages, and even sometimes into the mid stages, the person can hear it the one time and then sort of it's in that long-term memory. But again, especially if it was recent that the person passed, a lot of times it's just not going to compute. So I would reminisce about the husband, the dad. I would look at pictures of dad, talk about, I know you miss dad. I know he wishes he could be here, but I'm here for you. Again, I want to go back to the more time that your loved one has to ruminate when say they're at a community like Anthem and they're in exercise class and they're watching a movie and then there's an entertainer coming in, there's less time for the rumination and thinking those things and their brain to go in those sad, difficult directions. And if you're at home with your loved one, I'm not saying you need to have constant activity, but like give you an example. I worked with a family once where every morning the wife would get her husband up, they would go somewhere for a couple of hours, whether it was the park, whether it was shopping at Target, whether it was to meet a friend for coffee or breakfast. And then they would oftentimes have a medical appointment or something else. And then they come back, take a nap, watch a movie in the evening. They had a routine. They did some activity of some sort every single day. And that, I think, when you're lacking activities, the apathy, the boredom, and the rumination just becomes it's like on repeat. So I think that that's a good preventive way to do it. But reminiscing about dad, I'm here with you, looking at photos, talk about what memories about dad, those would be things. You can try reminding her. I caution overdoing it more than, in one day. If she says, well, where is my husband? And you say, well, you may remember he passed away. See how it goes. Sometimes the person doesn't have the grief reaction. So just see how it goes.
That was all the questions in the chat. Does anybody else have any other questions? Are there training courses for memory care caregivers in working with dementia patients? Sometimes caregivers ask questions and believe answers the dementia patient gives, even though the patient always answers yes to every question. Mm-hmm. Example, caregiver family member, did you drink some water? Patient, yes. In reality, they haven't had anything to drink in over an hour.
So I'm sorry, I just want to get some clarification. Are you the person asking the question? Are you a professional healthcare worker or are you a family caregiver?
Okay, I did allow, it says professional, no. I did allow your mic if you want to come off mic as well. He's a family, or she. I'm not sure. It's a family member.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So you're asking, so there's a professional aide helping your loved one. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, it sounds like maybe the aide needs more, like you said, more training. Yes, of course, there's plenty of training out there, and you could share Anthem's schedule with them because they do a ton of it. The Alzheimer's Association has all kinds of training. There's plenty out there. I think if this is somebody that you hired privately, it might just be not the right fit if this person doesn't really have the proper training. But also, if it's somebody from an agency or something like that, I would have the conversation with the home care agency and say, look, these are my concerns. Like, has there been training? But I also think there is something to be said for, your loved one better than anybody. There are certain things that you're going to you have the manual. So like Anthem can provide programs like this, Alzheimer's Association can do stuff like this, but you're the one that has the manual and the training tools for your loved one specifically. So I, as the professional, can come in and talk about what we've talked about tonight, but I don't have the manual on your loved one. So, for you to be able to say, hey, listen, she's going to tell you she ate, or she's going to tell you she drank water, but she didn't, just please know. But if this is a repetitive thing that she doesn't seem to understand what we've talked about tonight and the way that dementia is impacting the brain and language and communication and everything like that, then she just might not be the right fit. And maybe she's a good aid in some ways, or he is a good aid in other ways, but maybe doesn't have the proper training yet.
And then if you reach out to the Anthem Memory Care that's the closest to you, we can also help get you information on trainings in the area close to you so that we can provide that to you. Because it does say you also like some family to take the training as well. There's another question about any suggestions about a loved one that is fixated on money.
Oh, yeah, real common. So can you give a specific example?
Okay. Evan, I'm going to take you off mute. So if you want to ask the question, just give me 1 second. Okay, so you should be able to unmute now, Evan, if you want to ask the question.
Oh, hi, how's it going?
Hi.
Good.
Hi. Yeah, my mom just seems to be really fixated about not being able to have enough money for the future and constantly worried about how she's spending her money.
So I guess I don't know if you can be a little bit more specific, like what kinds of things will she say? Like, can you give me just like one example of something specific she's said and what prompts it, maybe?
A lot of it has to do with just constantly wanting to look at the charges in her bank account, and it's been an ongoing problem for her to like log into the account. So now she's asking me to print it out so she can look at it that way, and she kind of holds it as like resentment for things that she's paid for in the past, either towards myself or my spouse.
Okay, so would you put her in like the Ireland, the Italy, or the Yemen? Well, I'm guessing Ireland or Italy.
Probably Italy.
Okay, so she's not handling her own money anymore.
She is, but I'm just helping her.
Ooh, okay. So for one, I think somebody, if she is in the Italy stage, I would really consider talking to your financial professional, your attorney, elder law attorney in particular, about making sure that all of that is somebody that doesn't have dementia is going to be handling it, because she's probably going to get worse before I believe in miracles, but statistically she's going to get worse and not be able to handle her money. So this is a tough one though, because if she actually is still handling her money, is there a plan that somebody else is going to get involved with the money?
I would, yeah, I think I'm gonna eventually take that over, but kind of had some setbacks, and she kind of, I don't know, I guess it kind of progressed faster than I was realizing.
Yeah, this is a tough. So if somebody else was dealing with the money right now and she just was ruminating about it, I'd have one answer. But if she's actively dealing with her money and is it their accusations? Because you said it's geared toward you and your spouse about something that she gave you money for.
Yeah, like paying for like a dinner at Thanksgiving and buying a table for a present and stuff like that.
And so the distress is around what specifically?
Looking at her financials and feeling like she's gonna like run out of liquid money.
Oh, all right. Yeah. You know, I would just try to reassure her, but if she's directing her anger, and I don't know the history, but if she's angry for buying something, buying a dinner or buying a table, or she's feeling upset or worried about it, maybe the right thing to do is to have someone else kind of talk to her about her money and just reassure her. The reason that I say that is because I don't know this. I don't know this. You know your mom, obviously, but it could be that whatever this is that she's stuck in her head is you being part of the money is triggering it. So I'm wondering if it might be more helpful for someone else to reassure her, yep, mom, I've taken another look and it looks like there's plenty. I would say for you to do that, except it seems like she's directing some kind of, I don't know what word to use, disappointment or anger or I don't know, but I mean, I would totally dig into that if I was sitting down with you. I'd really want to know like a lot more detail about what the history was there. But I think she definitely somebody needs to get before she truly cannot do it, and then she's going to be all kinds of at risk for potential exploitation. So I wish I could guide you better on that one. This is definitely something that I bet you if you sat down with your local Anthem and you gave them more of the details about it, if you came in to take a tour or something like that, maybe they could point you in the direction of some resources that could help you.
Okay.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you very
I
much.
feel like it's like a bigger conversation.
Right. Thank you for your time.
Of course.
Okay. We're at 7:30. Jennifer, we want to thank you again. This was fantastic. We do have Jennifer's coming back next month as well. I don't have that date in front of me. Shoot. It's the second Wednesday of March. We'll have flyers that go out as well. They'll be on our Facebook pages and we'll be sending them out. So look for Jennifer again next month. And if you do have any questions or need any resources, please feel free to reach out to your closest Anthem community. We're always, we're always willing to help provide any resources possible. And we have a lot of contacts in in each of the marketplaces to help you. So please reach out. This was recorded and we are going to be posting it on our YouTube channel as well as our website and our Facebook pages. So if you have a family member or someone else who you think would benefit from this presentation today, please feel free to share that with them. Again, we do monthly free webinars for everybody because we want to help educate on dementia and make sure that caregivers are getting all the information that they need. So with that, thank you, Jennifer, and we will see you again next month.
I hope to see you next month. Bye-bye. Night.